When Americans think of Australia, they think of kangaroos, Crocodile Dundee, and Outback Steakhouse. Only two of those things are actually from Australia. But the decidedly American Outback Steakhouse has been a staple of casual dining culture for over 35 years. Where did it come from? Why the Australia gimmick? Do they even have Outbacks in Australia? Today, we're sinking our teeth into the history of Outback Steakhouse. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other steakhouses you would like to hear about. Okay, time for a walkabout through history. Australia.
Do you come from a land down under?
The land down under, where women glow and men plunder. If you've never been, you'll just have to take Men at Work's word for it. It also means you have something in common with the people who created Outback Steakhouse. You heard right, the founders of Outback Steakhouse, Chris Sullivan, Bob Basham, Tim Gannon, and Trudy Cooper, had never even so much as visited Australia when they opened the chain's first location in a South Tampa strip mall in 1988. So why did they choose to open up an Australian-themed restaurant, you ask? Well, just 2 years earlier, in 1986, the movie Crocodile Dundee became a surprise smash hit and ignited an intense but brief American love affair with all things Australian. Now, you're probably wondering, once they decided to do the restaurant, couldn't they have gone to Australia and done some research? The answer is yes. They could have, but they didn't. And not because they were cheap or lazy, although have you seen the cost of a flight from Tampa to Sydney? Outback's founders made the decision to lean into kitschy American stereotypes about Aussie culture rather than try to replicate the real thing. So a fact-finding mission wasn't necessary. Instead, they went on a shopping spree through junk and antique stores, grabbing basically anything that felt Australian to them, including things like bullhorns and sheep shears. Sheep shears we get, but bullhorns? The decor at Outback Steakhouse isn't the only thing that isn't authentic. Pretty much nothing on the Outback menu is actually Australian. Aussies, for example, don't really do Bloomin Onions. Toowoomba is a mountain town that has no seafood, and no matter what Paul Hogan might have taught you, Australians are not big on throwing shrimps on the barbie.
Let's put another shrimp on the barbie.
Let's not.
In fact, real Australians who visit Outback tend to find themselves as confused as Marty McFly walking into the Throwback Cafe in Back to the Future 2. But at least Outback Steakhouse was a massive success, right? Well, not at first. Despite mirroring the successful business model of other chains like Bennigan's and Chili's, people avoided opening day at the first Outback like it was a Mad Max villain. Management even had to ask employees to park all their cars in the lot and invite their friends and family down to avoid looking like an absolute ghost town. It was only after a massive advertising blitz that people started checking the place out, and once they did, there was no looking back. The founders even say other steakhouses in the neighborhood were soon calling to complain Outback was stealing their business. Long story short, by the time the chain hit its 25th anniversary, it would have over 900 locations worldwide. Outback even signed up to sponsor the College Football Hall of Fame Bowl in 1996. The game, which is now known as the vaguely sci-fi sounding ReliaQuest Bowl, is played annually in Tampa, where Outback started out and maintained their corporate headquarters. They kept the sponsorship all the way until 2022, making it the longest-running sponsorship of its kind in college football history. The Bloomin Onion, which Outback describes as a special onion hand-carved and cooked until golden, is the steakhouse's signature dish. It's like their Big Mac, if that sandwich was a gigantic fried onion. But the Bloomin Onion isn't really an Australian dish. In fact, the only place in Australia you can really get one is at Outback Steakhouse. So where did it come from? The mind of Outback co-founder Tim Gannon. He figured out the recipe for the deep-fried appetizer by tinkering with various spice combinations while working as a chef at Russell's Marina Grill in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1985. Incidentally, we'd wager that's where he also came up with the 17 different herbs and spices Outback uses to marinate their steaks. So why didn't they start a New Orleans-themed restaurant? Probably because there wasn't a hit movie called Crocodile Dundee.
Here it is, the Outback Steakhouse.
Yes, there is an Outback Steakhouse in Australia. In fact, there are 8 of them, none of which are in the actual Outback, which is probably for the best. The first Australian Outback opened in Parklea, New South Wales in 2001. Since then, they've added 5 more, as well as 3 locations in Queensland. Not bad for a restaurant that is basically poking fun at Australia.
Oi, 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 oi!
For the record, Australian Outbacks are basically just like American ones, except that they call shrimp prawns and they use the motto, "Live adventurous," rather than the American slogan, "No rules, just right." There are a handful of additional items on the menu, like an antipasto board of sliced meats and cheeses, a steak-topped entree salad, and fried mushrooms called bushies. They also offer 7 types of steak, whereas American Outbacks only usually offer 4. On the other hand, a few items Americans are used to, like mac and cheese, are MIA. Up until 2015, if you wanted an Australian ambiance with lunch, you had to eat in front of a Yahoo Serious movie. That's because Outback didn't start serving lunch until 2015. Why did it take so long? Did they not have lunch in Australia? Actually, it was about protecting their employees from burnout. According to Outback co-founder Chris Sullivan, employees at restaurants that serve both lunch and dinner can easily get trapped into working 80-hour weeks. That can be bad for employee morale, which eventually takes its toll on the level of service customers receive. On the other hand, Outback also didn't want to have to maintain 2 completely different shifts of workers, and having to prepare 2 meals in the same kitchen presented certain logistical problems when it came to keeping food fresh. Nonetheless, after a year-long test program proved profitable, Outback finally decided the hassle was worth the extra money and they made it work. While Outback Steakhouse isn't exactly the Ned Kelly gang, they definitely have some skeletons in the closet. For starters, there's the fact that the Bloomin Onion is bloomin' terrible for you. Even without the dipping sauce, it has about 1,960 calories, over 1,400 of which come from fat. To be fair, it's a deep-fried bowling ball, so this probably isn't surprising anyone. What might surprise you is the controversy over the item's description. On the restaurant's website, the popular appetizer was listed as Outback Aboriginal. Aboriginal Australians are the descendants of the continent's original native inhabitants, and the colonization of Australia during the 18th century took a brutal toll on Aboriginal culture. Spinning Aboriginal into a pun to sell a hulked-out onion struck some as poor taste, and the chain was accused of racial insensitivity. Outback apologized and eventually took the term down off its website. Outback found itself in hot onion grease once again in 2018 after the chain fired a server for complaining on Facebook about spending her whole shift preparing a single $750 order for a megachurch that didn't bother to tip her. When the church found out what happened, they felt bad about the oversight and tried to make it right by sending her a tip. Instead, Outback fired the server for complaining and refunded the church's money. Crikey! The internet got wind of the story and it remains a blemish on the Barbie. Outback has also been a lightning rod for lawsuits and has been paying off like a slot machine. For example, in 2009, they coughed up around $19 million over claims that it denied advancement opportunities to women, who had been kept out of higher-level management positions and jobs that came with profit-sharing interests. Then in 2013, they forked over $65,000 for firing a manager due to his disability. 3 years later, they had to shell out $3 million after forcing employees to work for free during an off-the-clock pre-shift preparation period the company called Outback Time. Turns out you can't make people work for free regardless of how fun a name you give it. Then in 2022, it came out that a lot of the food at Outback is microwaved, which a lot of people didn't realize. And even more recently, an Outback in Michigan accidentally served alcohol to a 12-year-old. The boy, who ordered a virgin daiquiri but was served the real Dundee, wound up in the hospital. But despite all the controversy, Outback did right by its employees during the pandemic. David Deno, CEO of Outback's parent company, waived his nearly $1 million salary in order to help cover the salaries of the workers who kept the locations running. The board of directors did the same, and as a result, Outback was able to make it through the pandemic while retaining most of their employees. As American eating habits have changed over the years, steakhouses have become a lot less popular. For a place called Outback Steakhouse, that's not great news. In fact, Americans, millennials in particular, have been slowly abandoning the increasingly expensive casual dining experience places like Outback, TGI Fridays, and Chili's provide. According to experts, these days people are looking for so-called fast casual dining at places like Five Guys, Panera, and Chipotle. Along with the proliferation of things like food delivery services and food trucks, Outback and similar chain restaurants are on the defensive. Competition from other casual dining chains, even other chains owned by Outback's parent company Bloomin' Brands, like Bonefish and Carrabba's, are cutting into profits as well. Outback has been trying to change with the times. In 2022, for example, they began redesigning their locations to dedicate more floor space to takeout and delivery. Conversely, they're also trying to cash in on nostalgia. recently offering a special boomerang throwback menu that featured 7 popular dishes from the original menu, including Alice Springs sirloin, Aussie twisted ribs, and Sydney's sinful Sunday. However, in February of 2024, Bloomin' Brands announced they were closing over 40 underperforming locations. And while they're not all Outbacks, a lot of them are.
What are your chances of getting out of here with that jacket on?
Is it possible Americans are finally over Crocodile Dundee?
Better than average.
Well, even if they are, there's still hope. Outback's semi-recent expansion into Brazil has been a surprising success, with its Brazilian locations earning 83% of the chain's total international revenue. Brazilians love Outback Steakhouse. Maybe someone should tell Paul Hogan. It might be the perfect time for another Crocodile Dundee movie. So what do you think? Are you a fan of Outback Steakhouse? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other weird history food videos.